we are coming to this episode with some really great information. We all feel like this is a really important topic. We're going to talk about wellness labs. So, what labs do you need to be requesting when you go to your doctor? We're going to talk a little bit above kind of your traditional, like, obviously, you're going to go to the doctor and they're probably going to do a CBC, a complete blood count, a metabolic panel, those types of things. We're going to give you another level of things that maybe you should ask for. Before we dive in, just a quick reminder. This episode is for educational purposes only and isn't medical advice. If you're dealing with a health issue, please check in with your healthcare provider.
Hi, welcome to the Nurse Coach Duo. Today we are the Nurse Coach Trio. My name is Angie McGuire. I am a board certified nurse coach out of Oak Park, Illinois, and the owner of Nurse Angie, Coach Angie.
And I'm Jen Schroer. I'm the owner of Clarity Health and Wellness Coaching. And we have Suzanne with us today, who's been here with us in a different episode. So, Suzanne, we'll let you introduce yourself and your company.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Greiner. I am a nurse coach as well. I am in the Denver, Colorado area, and I am the Peri Menopause nurse. That's how you can find me on social media.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, Suzanne. So I'm going to start with you, Suzanne, since you're our guest. Why do you feel like this is an important subject for us to have and talk about?
I think it's super important for women in midlife to get labs beyond the traditional labs that we get because we start to see different markers that occur and change in midlife. And I also want to say is like, labs are just like data points. And I think all of us kind of look at labs as just one part of the puzzle. But when you put it together with everyone, with women's symptoms and you look at their labs, it tells you more of a true picture of what's going on. But the other thing to note about lab work is sometimes we have symptoms way before labs can kind of show the changes. So you may go in or you may hear like, oh, it's normal. But I think it's also very important to know that sometimes it takes a while for labs to kind of indicate some changes, especially if you're very attuned to your body and your symptoms and everything. But there are so many things that are changing because our hormone fluctuations are happening that we really have to take a look at everything kind of going on to see if you have any downstream effects of your hormones fluctuating and changing. And I think it's important for us for that prevention so that we can sustain a longer lifespan that we have. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Angie, talk to our audience, talk to our midlifer women, and kind of give them your thoughts on why you think this is an important subject as well.
I think it's a really important subject because I think it's so misunderstood. I think we walk into our either our annual visits or if we're doing follow-ups and labs, we get our number and we don't really understand what it means. And I think it's crucial really in midlife to understand our numbers a little bit more and then what our risks are that correlate to those numbers and that you can make change. And it takes some work sometimes it takes medications, but again, I think, all three of us are about knowledge is power. And this is just Absolutely. Trying to provide information today. So everyone out there listening can have, this information walking into their provider's visits.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So yeah, I will just say this as well, that we all want to remind you, all three of us want to remind the audience that this is for information only. We are not diagnosing. We're not trying to tell you, this is what's wrong with you. We're going to talk a lot, relatively high level, but with enough information that you can say, oh, maybe I do need to go get this test. And this is really just to empower you to advocate for yourself and then go talk to your doctor and ask for these labs. And part of the reason that I find as well that it's so important, additional to what you guys said, is that I am sending clients and saying, hey, go talk to your provider, because here I thought all providers were doing certain labs. I'm like, wait, your doctor doesn't do an hemoglobin A1C, or your doctor doesn't do a cholesterol panel every time. And if you don't go armed with the why, sometimes if they're not used to like doing them for everybody annually, they'll actually say no. So you really want to go armed with the why as well.
Yeah.
All right. Well, cool. Well, let's just jump into it. I think we're going to start with cardiovascular health. So, Angie, if you want to touch a little bit about cholesterol panels and anything that you want to talk about cardiovascular health wise.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's a great place to start because I think everyone listening has heard about having a cholesterol panel drawn or a lipid panel drawn. And again, this is um, a lab, a marker that you may change as we move through our menopausal transition. And it's, again, like lifestyle can, help with it and, again, to understand it. So we're just start, everyone's probably had a total cholesterol. And that, we're looking at that. We're looking at LDL. We're looking at HDL. LDL is, the bad cholesterol. The HDL is the good cholesterol. We look at triglycerides. The loss of estrogen definitely it changes how our LDL kind of goes through our system, and we're more at risk for atherosclerosis, the plaque buildup. So I'll start with that. Do you guys have anything to add with that? A couple more labs I want to talk about, but
yeah, I think it's important to note that your cholesterol is actually the building block for all of your hormone production. So when your body starts to sense lower sex hormones that we experience in midlife, our cholesterol will want to, especially in women, we actually will produce a little bit more cholesterol to help bring up those levels of our sex hormones that start to decline. So it's very common for women in perimenopause to start to see an increase in their cholesterol levels, especially their LDL, along with the estrogen functioning, that you just spoke about with the estrogen fluctuations happening that can make your cholesterol levels change too. So you kind of have two things kind of happening at one time in midlife. So it's very important to really dive in and take a look at those things.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that we're also seeing a lot of people that this is some of their first signs. So definitely start, make sure that you're getting them annually. And Angie, I know you're going to go into a little bit deeper as well. And we can don't just go with just the normal, but that's a really great place to start and then add on from there. Yeah.
Yeah. And, highlighting the fact that heart disease is the number one killer of women. And we want we want women to realize that and sort of understand why and own it, and to try to make the changes now, so we can, live well into our next phase of life. Okay, so another couple labs that may not be as familiar but are commonly drawn are the apolipoprotein B, ApoB. This is it's a protein found in all the atherogenic lipoprotein particles. So it's including the LDL, VLDL, and remnants that carry cholesterol through the blood. So it's reflects the number of bad cholesterol proteins. So that's what they're looking at. And again, giving us more information if we are at risk or if we've already have cardiovascular disease, building, but are we at risk in the future too? Do you guys have comments about the ABO? I mean, we talk about it a lot. I think it's more, people are talking about it more because it's a lab that needs to be drawn, certainly looked at if you are out of the window of opportunity in getting on MHT, menopause hormone therapy. That is something significant that they're going to look at, to see if you already have plaque buildup because of the risk of clots. So, yeah. Do you guys have anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's important to note too that like some women or some of my clients, they may have had an elevated LDL or an elevated total cholesterol level. But when we look at the ApoB or lipoprotein A, like those levels are actually normal. So then to me, it seems as though they're just having that transition of their cholesterol and they haven't had that buildup of the bad cholesterol, because it goes from, you want the fluffy cholesterol versus the tiny small particles of
Small
cholesterol.
particles.
So,
Yeah.
so they like have more of that change that is mostly because their hormones are fluctuating and they don't have that underlying change of that estrogen changing so much in their body. So to me, it's like an early sign when you start to see like just the total, your total cholesterol and your LDL starting to go up, but then the other ones haven't been changed yet. So to me, I think, I don't know, that's just kind of what I've seen with a couple of my clients that have come to me and they're like, oh, I actually have all of these cholesterol levels done, which is surprising. I'm like, oh my gosh, thank your provider, because they are really, really looking out for you. And like, I rarely see that done. So, so I think it's one thing to know, because I had another client example that she tried menopause hormone therapy and then she stopped for a while, but she has a huge cardiovascular risk with her family and she was super concerned about that. So we drew some labs on her and it just showed that total cholesterol changes and LDL changes, but it did not show the reflective changes in her ApoB or lipoprotein A. It didn't show any of those changes. So I'm like, I think we caught it in time that, and she was open to restarting her menopause hormone therapy with her provider. So, so I think she is going to get it ahead of the game before she starts having those atherosclerotic changes. So
that's great. Yeah, I'll just add, so whenever I did my cholesterol, all of my levels were completely fine, but I had my particle size were small, and I wouldn't have known that had I not gone another level down. So I'm treating that specifically, even though all of my numbers are fine. So it's just like I said, a little bit deeper level, which is really great to know, and you can start battling some of the changes that are coming.
Yeah, and that's just to kind of confirm what you guys said. So that lab I read recently, I wasn't familiar with. It's a small, dense LDL particle lab, which you guys obviously you had that done, Jen, to understand, to take it to the next level. So it's just not as commonly talked about, I don't think.
It's not general standard at all. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the last one and wanted to talk about is the lipoprotein A, and this is more of a genetic marker. It is made up of LDL-like particles that are attached to proteins, lipoprotein A. And if you have this, it can promote plaque formation and clotting. So it's just something it's not that you can't do anything about it, but it's information that, as we've already said, to note prior to you having symptoms, right? This is something that can be drawn to get ahead of it in a sense. So it's very, in a sense, it's preventative care, right? We shouldn't have this information, especially if you have, family history. So,
yeah.
So I
all
think
great points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you guys have anything to add with that for those?
No, I think you nailed it. Thank you. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about stress and inflammation, which we see so much in women at this age. And not that we're not all stressed, the whole world, I think, is stressed, but there really is just another level. We talk all the time about the sandwich generation and all of that, but I don't think that we always think about what stress our body is under just going through this transition. Just perimenopause itself is so stressful in the body. So, Suzanne, talk to us a little bit about cortisol and how you would look at testing that and why.
Yeah, so I will test cortisol on some of my clients, and I usually ask them, like, I ask them about their stressors, like their stress levels that they're experiencing. And just through my interview process with them of like understanding their symptoms, there will be certain, flags. I'm like, oh, let's just check and see where your cortisol level is. And I've done some functional medicine training a few years ago and really kind of had to understand cortisol a little bit more. And cortisol, like, I think it gets a bad rap sometimes, but cortisol is normal as long as it comes back down. And we should have that fluctuation of it going up and down, especially if we're stressed about an event or something happening, it should come back down. But when it's abnormal is when it stays elevated. So there's something called the cortisol awakening response that everyone has. And so basically what happens is what wakes us up every morning is our cortisol. So the cortisol spike in the morning should wake us up, and then it should gradually fall throughout the day, kind of peaking around mid-morning to lunchtime, and then coming down, or actually probably mid-morning peaking and then coming back down. But then in the opposite response, we have melatonin, which is another hormone that our body produces. That should be have an inverse relationship with cortisol. So the melatonin should be rising mid to late day into the evening. It should peak at bedtime or right at, when we're sleeping. And it should have that inverse relationship. And so sometimes our cortisol can be super high in the morning, indicating that we are stressed more than anything. Sometimes we have a flattening of that cortisol curve. And then sometimes we just have like too much cortisol and wakes us up in the middle of the night because of stressful things. So there's a few different things that you can look at. Sometimes what I'll do is like initially just like do an AM cortisol level on them just to see where they're at. And if there's anything kind of like questionable, then they can get a 4-point cortisol saliva test where you can like do a saliva test throughout the day, and it can kind of measure your cortisol throughout the day. Are you having that curve come back down, or is it flattened in the daytime? So there's a few different things that you can look at. But the main thing I want to talk about with cortisol is that it's that survival hormone. So it's kind of bossy, and it's going to want to take over like things, if you're stressed, it's that survival hormone. But cortisol does something funny, and it does what it's called a progesterone steal. And so it steals from the process of progesterone being produced. So midlife women, we are losing our progesterone. It's kind of one of the first hormones that decreases in perimenopause. And so when that decreases and then our stress is going up, it actually can deplete it even more than normal. So of course, a lot of midlife women are overstressed, and then our progesterone is depleted even more because cortisol is robbing it through the progesterone steal. So a lot of things are going on. So this is where it's really, really important to focus on ways to regulate our nervous system during this time frame in our life, because not only do we have stress because of everything that we're going through, but also we have like it's stealing our progesterone, and progesterone is our calming hormone. So we have multiple things kind of happening during that time frame where our progesterone is decreasing. So but yeah, so your cortisol should peak in the morning and then should gradually decline throughout the day. There's other like testing you can do, like a Dutch test, but Dutch tests are so expensive that you can kind of find that out with other testing before that. So
Yeah.
do you guys have any input or any other additional insight into that?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is that, in addition to that steal that you're talking about, we also have your adrenals that are trying to like make up for, the fact that I'm not having any estrogen. And now your adrenals are stressed, right? Which is just going to increase that cortisol and make you feel, I really think it's that, and I talk about this all the time, but it's just that resilience that you notice that you lose, right? And so there is a resilience loss, but then there's this so like you don't have maybe the same tolerance, but then there's this level of I can't take anything else. Like everything is just overflowing your bucket of stress, right? And that level of whether some people have heart palpitations, some people just have, mind never settles, whatever it is, these different symptoms that you can kind of start to experience, the fatigue, that the gain around the belly, that you're like, why is this happening? And, really start thinking maybe this is cortisol. A good example is I have a client who she just can't seem to lose weight. And when I look at what she's doing exercise wise, every single day is some cardio. And I'm like, and then she said, my heart's just beating out of its chest whenever I'm going up a hill. I'm like, that's because your body is screaming at you to slow down, asking you, begging you to give it a break. And so if we can convince ourselves to just understand that our bodies don't function the way they used to, we have to give that cortisol a break, to let it come down and let us and get that kind of rest that we need.
And it's not just the steal from progesterone, it also affects the thyroid, our thyroid functioning of, like you said, their adrenals, our testosterone levels, or DHEA, are all kind of intertwined in this. So it's not just one avenue. Cortisol affects so many different areas of our body.
Yeah.
I do think, Suzanne, I love that you said that you feel like it has a little bit of a bad rap. I think because it just, especially in social media, it's the word right now that everyone is using. And again, it's misunderstood. And then people are desperate how to, understand it, but also lower it. How do we regulate our nervous system? How do we change our life? And how do we, implement new things, new activities to do that? And again, knowledge is power, but knowledge is like, like sometimes it's hard to realize that it's our bodies changing, right?
Right. Now you're stressed about decreasing your stress.
I know.
Yeah. Well, so to go along with cortisol, we said we would talk a little bit about inflammation. So I'd love to talk about like ANAs, right? So Angie and I did a episode with Dr. Carney, and it was called, I got to look at the name of it. It was called Autoimmunity Unlocked. That's what it was called. So that episode, we talked a lot about autoimmune. So she discussed the ANA, anti-nuclear antibody, and what she was saying is just that this seems to be a lab that's missed all the time. And I have seen that in my clients too. They go in and they have these, symptoms of whether it's joint pain or fatigue or just not feeling, like themselves again, and nothing. They've tested everything and just can't find an answer. And it's like, well, why are we not doing an ANA, right? So an ANA is going to screen the patient for autoimmunity activities. But let's go and see at least if you have the activity. It doesn't identify what type of autoimmune you have, but at least says we've got some activity going on here that we need to look a little bit further. And with those hormone shifts that we see in midlife women, we're really starting to see that can trigger and reveal the autoimmunity. We're seeing I think 80% of autoimmune diagnoses are in women that are in the 40 and older age range. So it's definitely something that, that I think, I would love to say that it should be in every wellness lab evaluation. I don't know that we'll ever get that, but if you're having some of those symptoms where you're kind of like, they mimic a lot of what is happening in menopause, right? Your brain fog, your joint pain, those types of things, just really, really fatigued, and you can't find a reason why. This might be another thing to test. Angie and I talk often about how and we've all heard about a nurse, or sorry, a patient has 8 visits with the doctor before they ever they find out that it's just menopause. But sometimes you have to rule things out so that you can say it's menopause, right? And I don't mean to say menopause isn't just anything; it's a big thing. But you know what I mean, so I think it's a good rule out test, and also important just because such a high percentage of women are being diagnosed, and one usually leads to two. And two, gosh, no, see, no, you're just going to get one more. So what do you guys think about ANA or autoimmunity? Any comments?
Well, I think you nailed it. I think often autoimmune, like you said, it sort of mimics the signs of menopause, but also just there's, when women struggle with autoimmune illnesses, and there's a lot of there's not answers all the time, and that can be very frustrating, along with similar in perimenopause and menopause. So
yeah,
but yeah, it's good information to have, especially if you're having just odd, symptoms that you've never experienced in the past.
Right. Anything to add, Suzanne?
I don't. I have a friend that well, I guess I do now. She's also a nurse coach, and she does a lot with autoimmune. And I think this, like you said, this is a good starting point to really focus in on, if you have those mystery, symptoms that don't correlate with everything else. I think it's good to or if you've been on HRT or menopause hormone therapy for a while, and you're still having joint pain, or you're still having symptoms that are not, being resolved, that's where you need to do it more. So.
Yeah, I've heard people say, some of the people in the menosphere say that, if you have joint pain and you can't get rid of it, try hormone replacement. And if that gets rid of it, then it was from your estrogen. If it doesn't, then we know we got to look further. I was like, well, that's kind of a good point. If you're not, if you're open to it. So just while we're on that, I'll add in the CRP as well, just the C-reactive protein. It's also, it's similar to the fact that it's testing inflammation. You hear people a lot of times just say, I really think just everybody seems like they're on fire and they're inflamed, but you hear people just say I'm inflamed, or my joints hurt, or my stomach is not right. And, they know know they've got inflammation, but they don't have any proof. They know it up here, right? So a CRP, that's going to be something that gives us, again, it's not specific, just like an ANA, it's not specific, but at least it tells us kind of your level of systemic inflammation, because inflammation is just like, it's like our epidemic, our that we're kind of ignoring, I think, or maybe just not understanding. You hear about inflammaging. The reason we're aging is because we're inflamed, right? We start to get heart disease, dementia, we can't lose weight. All of these different things that we start to see as we age. If we can get that inflammation down, then we usually will typically age better with less chronic diseases. So kind of keeping an eye on your CRP is a really good way of going, oh, what's going on here? Yes, I have inflammation. And back to what Angie was talking about with the cardiac health. That's a really good indicator that, you're looking at a risk there. So another good one that if you're just can't quite figure out what's going on, that might help you get some answers there. Suzanne, any extra thoughts on that one?
I agree. I feel as though there are a lot of women I see that their CRP is elevated, and that's where we have to really do a deeper dive in and start doing some nutritional changes. Looking at anti-inflammatory foods to eat, looking at potentially looking at omega-3s if that's a good thing for them to start on. Obviously, getting an okay by their doctor, but there's a lot of things, like a lot, inflammatory processes that happen in our body and we don't know why, but then they can cause so many things. They can wreak havoc on our body, like metabolic changes, like weight gain. There are like so many other cardiovascular changes. There's so many things that can be happening. And I like, for me personally, like I haven't been checking my CRP recently, but at the beginning of the year, I did this big lab panel through Function Health, and they did like over 100 different lab markers on me, and my CRP was elevated. I'm like, well, I didn't know that. So now I'm like, okay, now I'm in this process of trying to lower it. I'm like, because I just had some more labs just drawn recently, about 10 months later or 9 months later. And I'm like, oh, it's still elevated. It's raising my cortisol level because it's still elevated. But trying to find ways to reduce, and like, what else do I need to be doing to reduce it? It's not like too high, but it's just, it's just one of those things. Like, how can I improve, and be more efficient in my body? And that's still elevated. So it might just be one of those things that might be mildly elevated. But
yeah, absolutely. Angie, anything that you want to add? We covered a lot there. Yeah. I mean, I do think
you guys got it.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just the fact that, as we lose estrogen and progesterone, which are both anti-inflammatory, it only makes sense that we start to see more things inflamed. So, speaking of that, let's talk about some vitamin D, because if our D is low, that's not going to help our inflammation any. So, Angie, go for it. Tell us what we need to do there.
Well, I think this is one that gets drawn. I think it's commonly drawn at an annual visit, but then sometimes it gets missed. And people, it is a nutrient that's really vital to our daily living and how we feel and how we age. So, it can certainly affect our bone health of it. We have low vitamin D, our immune function, our mood. I've had like people complain of joints, knee, aches and pains, and that can be associated with low vitamin D levels. And I think, that's again, like it's misunderstood, and that, we hear a number, we're high or low, and we don't really understand it. So glad we're doing this episode.
I know, right?
It's so fun. But yeah, it can affect, you've already said it, inflammation. It can affect our cardiovascular health, our metabolic health. So it's something that is really easy information to access and then treat. Certainly, other than taking a supplement, we know that we can get, 20 minutes of sunlight that can help. That can help for many reasons, not only for vitamin D levels, but and then movement and activity can help, with our levels and our bone health more specifically. Anything else to add, guys?
One thing I do want to note is like women in midlife, because we have a lot of the health changes happening during perimenopause and menopause, we will start to see us having a harder time maintaining that vitamin D level. So really, it's important to keep it between the 50 and 70, I think 50 and 70 range, to have it at a healthy level. And so making sure that you're, doing the things that you can do naturally and potentially supplementing it at the, to help maintain those levels, because they will fluctuate a lot more during perimenopause and menopause. And like for me personally, I have to have a much higher dose, even though I live in like a mile closer to the sun. I still need to have my vitamin D levels super high, and it's I'm still having struggling to keep it up. So it's like, I have to take a higher dose of vitamin D, to supplement during this time. So
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of, when your dosage vitamin D with a K2 is kind of
yes.
like this gold standard to make sure that we're getting it absorbed. So, again, rechecking it is super important because you could be taking a supplement and you're not absorbing it. So that I think that's so important, if we do have gut inflammation and those types of things, we're not absorbing it. And so, yeah, you either need a higher dose or you need a different format. I try to tell people if you're going to do supplements to just make sure you're going to a nutrition store. Don't just buy your cheapest one at Walgreens or whatever. And then also look for third party tested so that you're making sure you're getting a good quality and you're not just wasting your money. But also, like I said, recheck, make sure, because vitamin D, it really is so important, right? We lose bone as we're aging, we lose immunity as we lose our estrogen and our progesterone. I mean, like all of this is it's not like if you take D, it's gonna fix everything, but it's certainly
Right.
going to help everything else get better. So I do think vitamin D is a super important one. So I'm really glad. And yeah, Angie, I agree. It should be being tested annually. And I think most are, but I'm always shocked whenever I talk to someone, they're like, I haven't had that done in 5 years. I'm like, oh man, let's go right to get to your doctor now. Let's get that test. So
And I kind of I also tell my clients, like, I feel like vitamin D replacement, it's not like you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I have all this energy all of a sudden. It's like one of those silent replacements that you're like, oh, okay, I'm
Oh,
starting to feel a little bit better, but it's not like that night and day difference. Like it's
mhm.
these subtle changes, and that you may not really recognize. So they might not notice a big change in their
Right.
well-being.
But
So,
don't stop taking them just because you didn't
right,
notice it, right?
exactly.
Do a lab
You
test
need
and
that for
find
your
out.
bones for sure.
That's
So.
absolutely, yeah. Yeah. All right, well, cool. So let's talk about metabolic and longevity. So I think this is super important as well because one thing we want to make sure everybody gets is like all of this is longevity, right? This is not just one thing or another. Like we're looking at, we want our health span and our lifespan to be closer to equal versus the current 16-year gap we have of healthy versus life, right? We're seeing people between 13 and 16 years of no health span in that lifespan. So we're looking at what can we do to improve our longevity and in the metabolic kind of range and keeping our metabolic health. That's one of those really great ways. So thyroid panels, super important for women to be doing, especially in midlife. So Suzanne, what do you want to tell us about thyroid panels?
I feel like this is my latest one that I don't know. It's my horse I want to ride and die on thing. I see this so often and it kind of drives me insane a little bit, but a lot of times women only get their TSH level drawn. So
Yeah.
your thyroid, it does so many things. It regulates your temperature, your metabolism, your cognition, energy. And when your thyroid system starts to falter and not work efficiently, a lot of things can happen. And a lot of the symptoms of your thyroid not working efficiently reflect perimenopausal symptoms too. So if for some reason you're not improving, like a lot of women are like, oh, I started menopause hormone therapy, but I still feel tired. I still feel this. I'm like, well, did you have your thyroid checked? Nope. I have my TSH checked. I'm like, oh, let's dive into this a little bit more. So your TSH is just one value. And a lot of times that's just the standard thing that a lot of physicians draw, and they do a reflex to T4 if your TSH is abnormal. So your TSH is just kind of like telling it's your brain releases that to kind of tell your thyroids to make the hormones. And then your thyroid also produces this T4. And this is like a storage system, it's the storage form of thyroid. And then you have T3, T4 converts into T3, and T3 is that active form that helps drive your metabolism and so many other factors. And then there's another one called reverse T3. And so reverse T3 is kind of like the brakes, that when it's actually high, it means that you have a lot of stress going on and it's actually blocking your thyroid functioning. So we really want to take a look at the whole story of what's going on with your thyroid during this time frame, and not just that one number. Because when you open up the hood and look at how your thyroid is working efficiently, there's a lot of things that can tell you what's going on. My example is my thyroid was completely normal, my TSH level, but when I looked underneath the hood, my T3 was a lot lower, or was abnormal, so it wasn't working efficiently. And I know we're going to talk about this later on, but I found out it was because my ferritin levels were low. So that's a whole nother story that we'll talk about later. But basically, like, I think it's important that we look at all of those values. And then there's one more that is really important, especially for women in midlife, is really taking a look at your TPO antibodies and your TG antibodies. And these really really kind of look to see if you have that autoimmune, any autoimmune issues with your thyroid, which very commonly in midlife, women get Hashimoto's. And that is kind of like, it's being triggered by those estrogen fluctuations, and some stress and gut dysbiosis are kind of happening. Sometimes it's nutrient depletion. So a lot of things can happen if you have Hashimoto's. And so I had a client that her TSH was on the high end of normal, still within normal range. But when we looked, and she had the weight gain, she had all these other symptoms, all kind of sounding like perimenopause. And she was in perimenopause, but a little bit more intense. And then when I looked at her like T3, T4 and her antibodies, she was actually like showed, her, she has positive for antibodies. I'm like, I think you need to talk to your provider a little bit more, because I mean, this could indicate Hashimoto's for you, which then goes down another rabbit hole of really understanding what's going on in your body and really working with your body to kind of improve that. So I think it's important not just to get your TSH, but also get your free T3, free T4, reverse T3, and your antibodies, to really take a deeper dive into your thyroid. So, because it can change so much in midlife, and a lot of it's that buffering system. It's been filtering so much stress and toxins and so much stuff throughout our whole entire life, that midlife, and especially with the fluctuations of estrogen, it can kind of just get overwhelmed and be like, I need help. Help me out here. So, but yeah. What do you guys have any input into your thyroid?
What you got, Angie?
Covered it.
You got it. Yeah,
you got it. No, I mean, it's fascinating. I think it's fascinating. The thyroid, oh my goodness, what it does for us.
Yeah, I agree. When clients come to me, if they don't have these numbers, I ask them to go get them before we start. We just go and assume that this is perimenopause, because I just think it's so important. Again, back to that rule out thing. I know it gets frustrating, and yes, it could be perimenopause, but what if it's not? And what if we're missing something that's important? And so these numbers are so important. And if your doctor resists this, obviously you're the patient, advocate for yourself, ask for it, but also just know that there are lab tests lab companies, you can go and order your own labs. And then Suzanne and I both have used Function Health, which is a bigger chunk of money because it's all kinds of labs. But if you just want to go get these and you feel like this is a picture that sounds familiar, and you're like, wait, this could be me, you could certainly go ask for these yourself, because it really does, again, is another one that really mimics the perimenopause transition and the same symptoms.
Right. And like you said, there are a lot of different lab companies out there that you can just request, I want this lab. I offer a service where I will draw through Rupa Health. I have a doctor co-sign my orders for me.
Yeah.
And it's super easy to get that. And a lot of times, a lot of my clients will then take their labs to the doctor and be like, hey, I had these labs drawn. And sometimes they're like, well, they're like trying to understand like how to treat that, because sometimes it's like, oh, wait, now we got to treat this. Now we got to address this.
Right.
One thing we didn't talk about that I really, especially when it comes to thyroid, is that when we look at lab values, I think it's important we have this normal range of lab values. And normal range is normal for that population in that area that you're living in. And that normal range could be like inpatient could be different than outpatient, because inpatient, your patient population is sicker And I just was listening to a podcast recently that one of the doctors is like, yeah, as we as a United States we've become sicker as a nation, our lab values, like the normal ranges, have like extended out more. And so what's within normal range may not be optimal for you. And that's where it's really important to understand your symptoms and looking at those lab values that I kind of talked about at the very beginning. So you really want to see what's optimal for you, and what's in that normal range may not be optimal for you. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, tell us your ferritin story.
oh, okay. So so ferritin, do you want me to go on into
Yeah.
ferritin? Okay, ferritin kind of measures your stored iron. So it's kind of like your energy reserve. And so this is one of those things that they changed the range for ferritin recently. So that normal range is much broader than what it used to be. I had me personally, let me just talk about that first. But I have been on menopause hormone therapy now for about 18 months. And this, I was doing great. I started losing weight. Like I started like maintaining my weight, and then started, I was able to have enough energy to start losing weight. Well, then it kind of plateaued for a while. I'm like, what is going on? And I had taken function health labs at the beginning of the year. And it did indicate, well, actually my ferritin level was at 18. So normal ranges for ferritin is 15 to 150. So I was still within normal range, but I was on the very low end of normal. And when I compared it to my T3, T4, that conversion was being affected. So your ferritin levels can actually impact your conversion of T4 to T3. And so when I looked at that, I was like, oh my gosh, no wonder why I haven't like lost any more weight. It's because my thyroid is still not working efficiently at this point. And so, and then when I looked at my ferritin level being 18, and what a normal range for a woman going through perimenopause should be in that like 60, 70, 80 range, I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm like so low. But a lot of times women in perimenopause, they will have low ferritin levels because they have those menstrual cycles that are heavy, bleeding, irregular, all over the place. But I have an IUD, so I don't know why mine was on the low side. It could be nutritionally more than anything for me. But for me, it was like I needed to replace my ferritin. And then once I did that, I lost like 5 pounds just by like, I was just like, oh, my thyroid is working more efficiently now. So I think it's important just to know that you should have those higher ferritin levels during perimenopause, because you could have those bleeding menstrual cycles that are really heavy and irregular. But because it really impacts your thyroid, that conversion from T4 to T3, it can really impact your weight. The other thing I noticed too, I had a lot of my hair falling out. Now my hair is actually staying on my head. So it's those little things that you're like, if you've had a big hair loss, that is like look into your thyroid, look into your ferritin levels. Those can actually be impacted by just these simple little things that we don't even realize that we need to have. And ferritin is not actually a common lab to draw, but I have seen a lot of my clients recently had their ferritin drawn, and so that was really good to see that. So yeah.
Do you think providers are drawing it more frequently? I mean, just from their learning around perimenopause and the transition?
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it might be some of your symptoms. If you're tired, that might be one of the things, like, oh, let's check your iron levels. So they may do a full iron level, or iron panel to see. But ferritin is what really key to understanding, everything that's kind of going on with your iron levels. So yeah.
Yeah, I think fatigue is the really common one where they're like, "Oh, we're going to check your iron," but I don't know if they always think about hair loss as being one of those, and again, so many different reasons of why you could be losing your hair, but it doesn't hurt to test all these labs and at least rule that out. So tell me, Suzanne, like who put that picture together for you? Was it your provider? Was it Function Health? Was it just yourself? Was it AI?
So I started going down this rabbit hole of do I go down, like, do I start a GLP-1? Do I microdose? Do I do that? Because I was kind of like, I'm not quite where, because I had gained about 25 pounds going through perimenopause, and I lost about 15 pounds. So I was still like 10 pounds heavier than I usually am. And I was just like, okay, let me look at my labs one more time. Let me do a deep dive. And so I went down this rabbit hole. And then when I, looked at my ferritin, I'm like, oh my gosh, my ferritin's really low. Let me see what it does. And I'm like, oh, it does stuff to your thyroid. And so when I looked at that, and then I looked at my T3, T4, then I was like, oh, like it was just all like came together. And then
Yeah.
of course, researching it and then just hearing more of the, top menopause doctors kind of talk about ferritin levels lately more and more. I was like, oh, this makes sense. And then like your thyroid is affected. And like, I think a lot of people will say like your ferritin's low because of the, your menstrual cycles, but I don't think they always connect it to your thyroid. So I think that's like the thing that I've been like, oh, don't, this affects your thyroid, your T3, T4, because that's like the things that we don't draw as much as that T4 to, T3 conversion looking at that to see if it's being, affected or not. But yeah, it was definitely one of those things. It was like, oh my gosh. But yeah, it was just, I started just going down this rabbit hole. I'm like, let me see, like, let me try everything I can in my favor that I'm not doing correctly before I start going down the route of a GLP-1 or anything like that. So I know, well, and then the other thing is like I had all that inflammation. I'm like, well, GLP-1 will help with that inflammation too. So I was like, okay, there could be some value in my personal life, but yeah, so.
Yeah, we did an episode on GLP-1s as well. So we can put that with Michelle from Westplex. So we can put that in there in the show notes as well, just to give some information on how GLP-1s and the hormone loss work together. I'd please, like, I know some people will just grab on and be like, I'm going to go take something for my ferritin. I'm going to go fix my ferritin just so that I can lose 5 pounds. That's what Suzanne did. Let's make sure that we're checking our labs and having everything assessed. So, but speaking, yeah.
Absolutely. And too much ferritin can cause a lot of problems. So we don't want to be like, oh, I'm going to just take ferritin just to take ferritin. No, like too much ferritin is actually not good for you. So we want it within that good range. So
yeah. Well, and so speaking of, episodes and weight gain and stuff, so that's what we want to talk with Angie next about hemoglobin A1C and fasting insulin, because as we talked with you last time, Suzanne, insulin resistance is super common in women in the midlife. So yet another episode that we'll include in our show notes, but it was a great episode with Suzanne. So Angie, talk to us and remind us a little bit about what we discussed about hemoglobin A1C and fasting insulin in that episode.
Yeah. And Suzanne, please jump in if certainly I feel like you're the expert on this. But I think, hemoglobin A1C is a common lab in some ways. I feel like and not everyone gets it, but it's something is not difficult or it's not off the radar for most medical providers, right? They're going to draw it. And it's a lab that shows your blood glucose levels over a long period of time. 2 to 3 months. I see 3 months more than 2 months, but 2 to 3 months. So it gives us this number of where your blood glucose is, the average, right? So, and we know, just so for everyone out there, we want our glucose not to run high for long periods of time. It causes lots of damage to all our body symptoms, or symptoms in our body. So it's something it's great data to have. It's great information to have. And then you can take it and it can show, whether you're, are you pre-diabetic or are you diabetic, and how can you move forward with there, and as nurse coaches, it's good information for us to have when we're working with our clients, because we then, obviously nutrition and movement and water and, there's, all the lifestyle stuff that we work on with our clients. So that's good information. Certainly people have a fasting glucose often in their annual visits, not always, but that's a good measure, but it's only a one-time thing. So it doesn't give you a long-term information. Fasting insulin can be drawn. I think it's not as common either in a general practitioner's office. And was just reading about this and you guys please jump in, is about this HOMA-IR, this insulin resistance score, that I think is brilliant, because that information we can provide is like, what's our pancreas doing? Are we pumping out so much insulin because we don't know, we've all these, we're worried. It's worried about the blood glucose levels and the glucose not getting into the cells like the way we want it, and because of the insulin resistance. And so, I mean, that score and, that is really preventative. Wow. Like that is and I don't know, you guys probably know a little bit more about that than I do. And if you guys could share that, I think that's really great. But again, understanding where your blood glucose levels are running in general can be the hemoglobin A1C, fasting glucose, fasting insulin, can give us a lot of data. And there's things, it's really important to have that information. And certainly there's help out there for you before you get to be pre-diabetic or diabetic.
I like to add in there, I usually will tell my clients that your fasting insulin levels will kind of give you more of a before you start seeing changes in your hemoglobin A1C. It's going to show you changes prior to that reflective 90 days of your hemoglobin A1C. And I think it's important because I feel like hemoglobin A1C is great. I love it. I love seeing that picture. It's much better than just the fasting glucose. Like you said, it's just that one moment in time. But the fasting insulin kind of gives us like how hard is our pancreas working during this time frame way before we start seeing changes like in our glucose level. So it's kind of like preemptive prior to like that hemoglobin A1C changing. But I do like that was the HOMA IR or whatever.
Yeah,
HOMA R.
IR.
But I've had that drawn before, and I was just like, and that was I was surprised. I'm like, what is this lab? I've never seen it before. And that was the time I was like pre-diabetic. And so at the start of my perimenopausal journey, I was just like, oh my goodness. I'm like, where did this come from? Like all of my other hemoglobin A1Cs have been normal up until the time frame that I was starting to experience all these perimenopausal symptoms. And that was elevated. So I haven't had it rechecked since then, but I'm kind of curious to see what it is now, but I might have to order that on myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I mean, like, I agree, Angie. It's like well, I swear I always explain it to people like, okay, so your blood sugar, your fasting glucose is normal, but how hard does your body have to work to get it there? That's why I want to see that in fasting insulin. Like, let's really figure out what is our body doing, because otherwise it's like, again, that's the early predictor, right? If you're looking at only the hemoglobin A1C and the fasting glucose, it's like, all right, well, you're already there. It didn't predict it. You're there. So like, let's see if we can find out earlier. So because unfortunately, human nature is we react to things. We're not going to prevent it, right? It's not going to be like, oh, I'm going to prevent it. We're going to react to things. Because as Angie knows, I think everyone needs to live like we're diabetic. Like we talk about that all the time. Like,
I do too.
Yeah, yeah. And we talked about last time whenever we were on the call, like we love Glucose Goddess and we love all those little tidbits she gives and stuff. Because I mean, even if you're not diabetic or pre-diabetic, if you live like that, we're gonna fix all these labs we just talked about. Right? All those labs are going to come back optimal, not within normal, and is optimal.
Yeah, I think so much. It just hit me. Like, I think so much that like we have these lab values that are standard for yearly, like when it comes to like hemoglobin A1C or fasting glucose, but it's almost like, you're in like you have this polluted stream. And like you keep going, you're at the pollution, where you are at in the stream. You start cleaning up at that point of where you're at in the stream instead of going up to the source of where the pollution had started. Like, why don't we go to the source of what's really like before all these major changes are happening in your labs, and let's get to that source and start doing that more of that preventative work before it starts seeing the downstream effects of what's happening with your body because you haven't done the upstream cleaning up of your body. I don't know. It's just kind of an analogy.
That's a good analogy. Yeah, I like it.
It's good.
Well, and we're talking a lot here about weight gain, and I mean honestly, part of it is because that's such a picture of metabolic health, but also it's one thing that gets women working on things, right? So I'm sure that everybody's heard we'd like, gosh, just get off the scale, stop worrying about the scale. We want to do some trending, sure, but like it's not this. The scale isn't the only thing. So one thing I would like to recommend to my clients is to do the waist to hip ratio. And so, measuring the smallest part of your waist and the largest part of your hips and dividing them by each other. And that gives us a better picture of that metabolic health because we're always concerned about that visceral fat around the abdomen, right? So, yeah, it's more than just that our pants are getting tight and we don't look as good in our swimming suit and all these other things that are irritating us. It really does, it really is an indicator of true metabolic health. And that fat that goes around the organs is so dangerous, right? So, when we do this measurement, we get kind of an indicator of how is that visceral fat? What is that looking like? And that's a much better trend than the scale, right? Because if we're lifting weights, then our scale might go up. If we're still cycling, our scale might go up, and we might go down if we, whatever, because we didn't, whatever reason, like you peed a lot that day. Like that's all it takes for women, right? Like you drink a lot, so you've actually flushed yourself out. So the scale is just not a great indicator for our true metabolic health. If you just want, if you want to get on it, totally fine. Just I think that it's just something that we need to start shifting away from actually meaning anything to us about how healthy we are. So I don't know if you guys have anything on that because that's a big soapbox for me. If you guys want to add to that
Well, I
soapbox.
think it's the one thing that you can do today without needing to order. Like you can
Yeah.
do this today on your own with a measuring tape. I think it's important. I like you kind of talked about the visceral fat. That's like the sub-Q fat is something we can work with, but like the visceral fat takes a little bit harder. That's the
Yeah.
inflammatory process kind of going on in your body. But I recently had like a body scan done too.
Mhm.
Like it was a DEXA fit scan. So it
Sure.
looked at your bone, your muscle, your fat, and it actually showed my visceral fat too. And then I'm like, well, that was a good baseline to have.
Yes,
So like improve
definitely.
from here. But I mean, that obviously costs money to do that. But like, doing the waist to hip ratio is something like you can do very
Yeah.
easily.
For free at home.
Yes.
Any thoughts, Ange?
We could talk about weight and weight gain
I know all day long, right?
how Gen Xers have been affected by
Yes.
the world and weight. And no, I mean, everything that you said, I think I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Anything we can
Great.
do at home and anything that we can bring to get us moving forward and thinking about, we're aging and we need
Yeah.
to pay attention.
Do you have a normal range for that? I guess
Yep.
I'm not as okay. What's
Yeah,
the
so I mean if you were to just like go Google it or whatever, it's going to probably tell you less than 0.85, right? But really optimally we want to be less than zero point 0.8. But if you're 0.85, I'm not going to be like go get it down to zero point 0.8, but that zero point 0.8 is really where you is where you're sitting pretty. Yeah. Yeah. So I think we'll wrap it up with one last topic that hopefully we don't go on too long for, but I think everybody's going to listen to this and go, how did they not talk about hormone levels?
no.
So, so I just want kind of each one of us to kind of give a little bit of a thought about, should you or shouldn't you, right? Because I think part of why we aren't discussing it is because everyone else is discussing it. Right? It's out there. All the information is out there. And there is so much that you could say, it depends. It depends. So, Angie, I'll start with you. To test hormones or not to test hormones? That is the question.
Okay, well, I'll cover in menopause.
Okay.
Okay, so
Love that.
you're in menopause, you're on or off MHT. We're off. Is that the
Whichever.
question?
No,
Okay.
just whether you should. It's broad,
Okay.
broad.
I think when you reach menopause, like if you're on menopause hormone therapy and you've been on it and I have not read a certain amount of time, let's say, a provider that I follow and have gone, mentorship, she tests at 6 months, like just to see how you're doing. And so I am a proponent of testing hormones at that time, just to make sure that you are absorbing the hormones that you are taking.
Yeah.
So I'm on a patch and I plan on getting asking for my estradiol to be checked, just to make sure that I'm absorbing it in the way that I should, and if I should go up or not with my dosage. But again, there's symptoms that you can tell too. If you are too high, you're going to have breast tenderness. I mean, you can feel a little bit puffy, or, that can be with progesterone too. But I think I'll stop there because I'm sure you guys, that's on MHT in menopause. I'll cover
Okay.
that part.
All right, Suzanne, why don't you talk about perimenopause?
So there's two camps, I think, in perimenopause. Either you test it or you don't, because your hormones can fluctuate day to day so often, so frequently. But I'm in the camp, or like some people are like, nope, don't test it because it fluctuates too much. It's not a true reflection, blah, 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 like all that stuff. And then there's a camp of like, why don't we just test it just to see where you're at? And we know at that point in time, that's where you're at. We know that it fluctuates. I'm kind of in that camp. I'm in that second camp of like, why not we just test it? Because if you are still cycling, and you're still kind of like, maybe your cycles are shorter or longer, we can kind of like guess, like, at days like 3, your estrogen is going to be a little bit higher, roughly. Your progesterone 19 to 21 phase, should be at its peak. Like if we know that progesterone is going to be the first one to decline during perimenopause, why don't we just see where you're at that point in time? And we know at that point in time, and you take it based on your symptoms, you combine your labs and your symptoms together. I think we have a better picture of health, of like what's truly kind of going on a little bit, give or take, knowing that it fluctuates. Like we know it fluctuates. I think it's really important because we never really test our hormones prior to this time frame, and I really feel like and maybe you're going to cover this, Jen, but like I feel like it's important. I have a 16-year-old daughter, and I'm dealing with kind of PCOS symptoms, and we kind of named her as pre-PCOS last year, and so we have a baseline of her labs, and now I can tell she has more androgens in her body because she's ragey, terrible acne. And so at least we have a baseline. And so we can, obviously she's 16, but now we can kind of have an idea like where she's at this year, but like, why not kind of see where that trend is? Because sometimes we do start a lot of women on menopause hormone therapy during perimenopause, and to at least start feeling better. Like, to me, why not? So
Yeah.
It's just another data point in our data that we have on women. So that's my opinion.
Yeah. No, I think all of us believe in hormone therapy. We believe in hormone testing. Like I said, there's always kind of like a caveat. It depends. One thing I would just add to what you guys did, because I think you covered it beautifully, is that if you're going to get your hormone testing and you're cycling, so premenopause, is that you're doing it at the same time in your cycle. And that goes along also with your thyroid testing. Like your thyroid changes with your cycle as well. So make sure you're getting these tests done cyclically. Usually like your estrogen, your second or third day into your period, your progesterone, you're going to have your peak at the 19, 21 to 21 day. So you really want to make sure that if you're testing, that you're testing, like we're comparing apples to apples, right? So I think that's super important when you're doing it. And then I do agree that like in perimenopause, you can go with just based on symptoms, but if you want the number, go get the number and just, tell the doctor, I understand that it could fluctuate. I just am a data person. I want to see the number, and then agree with you, Angie, wholeheartedly is, post-menopause, when we're testing, we have to make sure that like, if you're still not feeling good, you have to make sure that either you're absorbing or you're not over absorbing, because you could be in either side of that. So.
Yeah. And we also want to, if it's going to protect our bones and our hearts, we want to be at that level of protection.
Yeah.
We didn't mention testosterone, and I just think maybe we should real quick.
Sure, absolutely.
Please add in, because it's, there's all sorts of discussion around testosterone, and I think it's less tested in a general practitioner's office. Maybe in functional medicine, it's I'm sure it's a bit different, but I just think, if, you can ask to have your testosterone levels drawn, but know why you're doing it as well, I think. And I think that's why, just to maybe based on symptoms or, I think mostly on symptoms, right? At this point in time, because the test is costly. I've had clients get tested and it's not cheap. And just know why you're doing it. And one of them, and we know the only FDA reason to get testosterone is if you have hypoactive, dysphoric,
low libido.
Low libido. Oh my gosh, I was just reading about this and I lost the acronym.
That's okay. It's
Um,
menopause.
yeah. Well, yeah. I just so like, but low libido and ruled out other reasons for low libido. So it's not. It's I think it's a serious. I mean, it's all our health is serious, right? And
Yes.
we want to understand why we're doing things. And if you don't understand why, that's when you need to talk to your medical provider or a nurse coach or people that understand. And I guess that's all I wanted to say. I'm sure there's other things you would want
Boom. Mic drop by Coach Angie.
to add.
Perfect way to end it. So thank you so much, Suzanne, for joining us and having this important conversation for our audience. And if you like this episode, please make sure to give it a like and subscribe. And feel free to add comments or reach out to one of us if you have further questions. We'd love to help you.